Snow Queen, written by Hans Christian Andersen. This is an enchanting tale told about two young children named Kai and Gerda. Kai ends up being put under a spell by the Snow Queen, and Gerda has to go on a quest to try to save him. Once upon a time, a wicked troll created a powerful mirror. Everything good that was reflected in the mirror looked ugly. Everything evil looked appealing. The troll was proud of his creation. He decided to bring the mirror up into the heavens to make fun of angels. Higher and higher he flew, laughing along the way. The higher he flew, the more he laughed, until he could barely hold the mirror. The mirror slipped out of his hands and fell to the ground, broke into 1,000,000 pieces. The pieces, as small as tiny grains, were picked up and carried by the wind across the earth. If a flake like that got into someone's eye, they would forever see everything evil. If a splinter got into someone's heart, that heart would turn to ice. The troll laughed even harder about this. He couldn't wait to see the evil his mirror would inflict upon the world. In a city, there lived two families who shared a small rose garden. A girl named Gerda lived with her grandmother, and a boy named Kai lived in the other home. They were best friends, as close as a brother and a sister. In the summer, they would open their windows, step outside, and be together. In the winter, they would defrost their windows and wave at one another. One wintry day, Grandma, Kai, and Gerda watched the snow fall outside the window. "Look at those white bees swarm," Grandmother said. "Do snowflakes have a queen like bees do?" Kai asked. "Yes, they do," Grandmother said. "The Snow Queen flies at the center of the snowstorm. She blows into the windows and makes ice flowers." Gerda imagined the Snow Queen and shivered. "Could she come indoors if you left the window open?" "If she comes inside, I will melt her with the warmth of the stove and turn her into a puddle," Kai said boldly. Just then, a gust of icy cold wind opened the window and threw in a whirl of snow. Kai ran to the window to shut it. "Ouch!" he cried. It was a small piece of evil that had flown in with the snow. The next moment, another splinter got into his heart, and right away his world changed. "What happened? Did the snow get in your eyes?" asked Gerda. "Get off me! I'm going outside to ride my sled," Kai said. "But it's late," Gerda said with surprise. "I don't care." Gerda began to cry. Kai ran outside to join the older children sledding. It drove so fast that Kai didn't even have time to take a closer look at it, but he managed to tie his sled behind this fine sleigh. The sleigh sped up, pulling Kai from the town square through the city gates farther than Kai had ever been. Snowfall turned into a blizzard, and Kai couldn't see anything around him. He was very cold and very scared. The other town children headed home, but Kai stubbornly clung to his sled. The snow fell harder, and the snowflakes grew bigger. Finally, the sleigh came to a silent stop. The driver turned to look at Kai, her eyes piercing in the storm. It was the Snow Queen. "Come, Kai, come sit with me and get warm." The queen's voice whistled like the winter wind. Kai climbed into the sleigh and pulled a fur blanket over himself. The Snow Queen kissed him once on the forehead, and he was warm. She kissed him again, and he couldn't remember anything. Not Gerda, not Grandma, and not his home. He stared up at the moon all night long as the snowstorm whipped around him. When the day broke, he slept at the feet of the Snow Queen. As time passed, no one knew where Kai had gone. Most believed he had drowned in the icy river, but not Gerda. She often looked out her window at the empty garden and longed for Kai to come home. Winter turned into spring, and Gerda went to the river. With her new red shoes, she had dropped them into the water. "I will give you my new shoes if you give me back my friend," she told the river. The current carried her shoes right back to her. The river didn't want her shoes, because the river hadn't taken Kai. But Gerda thought she needed to go just a little bit farther from shore. She stepped into the little boat, untied it from the dock, but it was too late. The current carried it along with helpless Gerda inside. All the way down the river, Gerda finally reached land. She climbed out of the boat and cried for help. Her calls were answered by an old woman who helped her to her feet and welcomed her to her home. The old woman was lonely and wanted Gerda to stay with her forever. After listening to Gerda's story, she snuck outside into the garden and removed all the roses. She didn't want anything to remind Gerda of home. Gerda decided to stay and rest. She almost forgot about her journey to find Kai, till one day many months later, the old woman wore a long, large, brimmed hat that was decorated with roses. Gerda again remembered. She went to the garden, determined to find out what had happened to Kai. One by one, Gerda asked the tiger lilies, the honeysuckles, the daisies, and the buttercups. Each told her a story about someone lost, but not about Kai. Gerda knelt in the dirt and wept. As her tears splashed onto the ground, the roses reappeared. "We have been down under the earth," they said. "We know that Kai is not dead." Gerda knew then that she needed to keep looking. She had to find Kai and bring him home, so she continued her journey. Gerda kept walking. Every day the air grew colder. When the first snow had fallen to the ground, Gerda was approached by a crow. Gerda was lonely, and she told the crow her story. Maybe, Kai can be seen," the crow said. "The boy I've seen now lives with the princess. The land they were on belonged to a princess who not long ago had decided to get married. She had decreed that any eligible man in the land could come to her castle and woo her. Whoever was most clever would receive the princess's hand in marriage." The crow had watched the eager men line up. There he saw a boy with Kai's description of brown hair. "That must be Kai," Gerda said. "He was carrying a knapsack." "You must mean his sled," Gerda corrected. This boy was clever, so the princess decided to choose him. "Surely that's Kai," Gerda said. "Can you take me to him?" Gerda followed the crow through the royal garden and to a short door in the back. The door opened in a dark, winding staircase. Once upon the stairs, they passed from one ornate hallway to the next before arriving to the chamber. Gerda pushed the door open and peered at the sleeping bodies. The prince had his back to her, but she knew it was Kai. Gerda raced to his side and shook him. The prince and princess awoke and lit the lamp. By the glow of the light, Gerda saw the prince's face. It wasn't Kai after all. She couldn't help but weep. She had been so sure that her journey had ended, and that she and Kai would be reunited. The prince and princess listened to Gerda's story. They were good people, and they wanted to help. The next morning they dressed Gerda in the finest clothes of silk and velvet. "You are welcome to stay with us," the princess said. But Gerda knew she couldn't. Kai was out there, and she needed to find him. The prince and princess outfitted her with the warmest boots and muff and gave her a golden coach. "Goodbye and good luck," they called, and waved as the carriage pulled away. Gerda was warm and glad to be moving faster than on foot, but her comfort didn't last long. In the dark forest, her golden carriage shone like the moon. "Gold!" voices cried, and the carriage came to a sudden halt. Robbers attacked them. They stole her horse and killed the driver. They dragged Gerda out of the coach. "Let's kill her too," someone cried, and Gerda covered her face in fear. "Stop!" a small voice piped up. "Don't kill her. She could come home with me and be my playmate." The voice belonged to a robber girl who was very spoiled and always got what she wanted. "I won't let them kill you. You must not make me angry, though. Do you promise?" asked the girl. The robber girl took Gerda home with her. She boasted about her collection of animals. "And those are my doves," the robber girl said, pointing to the birds. "I keep them locked inside because otherwise they'll fly off." Gerda was quite frightened and started to cry. She told the robber girl her whole story and how much she missed Kai. "Come and sleep here. I'll protect you." The robber girl showed Gerda where to sleep, curled up nearby, tucking her knife under her pillow. "We have seen Kai," they said the doves. "We rode in the Snow Queen's sleigh. They're going to Lapland, where it is always winter." "How do I get there?" Gerda asked. "Ask the reindeer," the bird said. "He's from Lapland." In the morning, when Gerda told the robber girl about the doves and what they had said, the girl decided to help her. She snuck her past the rest of her family and gave her the reindeer. "Take this girl with you to Lapland," they instructed. "By doing this, you will have earned your freedom from me." The reindeer were overjoyed. He allowed Gerda to climb onto his back, and they took off in the wilderness. They journeyed day after day with little rest, traveling farther and farther. "Look at the northern lights," said the reindeer. The colors danced across the sky. Finally, the pair arrived in Lapland. They stopped at the first house they saw, eager to get out of the cold. The Lapp woman welcomed them in. "You still have 100 miles to go," she said. "When you see the fireworks, that means that you're getting close." The Lapp women instructed them to find the Finnish woman who lives near the Snow Queen's palace. When you have reached this woman's home, the fire will be strong, and you will have to take off all of your boots and mittens. The Finnish woman gave the reindeer ice to cool off. He thinks it's the best place in the world, because he has a sliver in his eye and a sliver in his heart. This keeps the Snow Queen's power over him. "Can't you help this poor girl?" the reindeer begged. "Can you give her the power to remove the glass?" "Don't you see she has a power within her?" the Finnish woman said. "Look at all the animals and people who have served her. Look how far she has come, when she started out with nothing. That is her true power. Take her to the Snow Queen's garden. Then come back. She will be able to save Kai on her own." The Finnish woman put Gerda on the reindeer's back and sent them off. "I don't have mittens or boots," Gerda said. But the reindeer kept running. He stopped at the Snow Queen's garden, let Gerda climb off, and ran away. Gerda stood alone at the gates of the Snow Queen's garden. The snow stung her feet and the wind whistled in her ears. With the palace in sight, she ran through the garden as quickly as she could. The snow darted in every direction, and as she drew closer, the snowflakes grew bigger. They took the form of spears. Gerda continued on, thinking only of her lost friend. Meanwhile, at the Snow Queen's palace, Kai was there alone. "I'm going to the warm countries with volcanoes," the Snow Queen said that morning. "I thought I could shock their peaks a bit." The Snow Queen flew away. The palace walls were made of snow. The windows were made of wind and ice. In the middle of the palace there was a frozen lake. In the middle of the lake was the Snow Queen's throne. The lake itself was cracked in a million tiny pieces. The Snow Queen had told Kai that if he had formed the word eternity with the pieces, he would be free. That was how Gerda found Kai. He was sitting on the icy floor in the empty hall. He was black and blue from the cold. "Kai!" Gerda cried. "At last I have found you!" Gerda ran to him and held her in her arms. His body was stiff and cold. His eyes looked at her without recognition. "Kai, sweet Kai, come back to me," Gerda begged. She cried as she held him. He looked up at Gerda and wept. His own tears cleared his sight once again. "Gerda," Kai said, "my dear friend, where have you been?" Gerda told him every part of the journey, from her red shoes in the river, to the roses, to the crow, to the prince and princess, to the robber girl, and the reindeer who helped her. She kissed his cheeks and cold fingers and watched his color return. Kai and Gerda were so happy they stood and danced. They danced on the icy lake and danced forever. When the ice stopped, it lay down and formed the word eternity. Kai had earned his freedom. Hand in hand, Gerda and Kai walked out of the palace. The reindeer was waiting for them. Soon the snow began to melt. Spring was here. Gerda and Kai traveled together. At the edge of the forest, they came upon a river. They followed the river upstream, and soon they were back on the old street once again. They walked up the steps to see grandmother. Everything inside looked the same furniture, the same clock, but they were different. They were no longer children. They were two friends who sat out on the old chairs and held hands. They looked at the roses. All the memory of the Snow Queen disappeared. They sat as grown-ups, but their hearts were children. Outside it was sunny and warm, a perfect summer day.